Radio 103.1 FM, Polish-American Mix. We have an honor to have a special guest in our studio, Ambasador Brzezinski. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so looking forward to talking with you.
I need to ask this question, and I'm sorry, it's on a bit of a lighter note. We'll come to serious questions in a moment. But how is Teddy doing on social media?
Great question.
Did you pay for his Twitter account?
So I love that you asked that question. Social media is the way to relate with people in 2023. And I brought with me to Warsaw from Northern Virginia my German Shepherd named Teddy. And so I have an Instagram account, #AmbassadorTeddy. Once again, #AmbassadorTeddy, that not only shares Teddy's exploits and experiences in Poland, but frankly, mine as well. And I was in Washington earlier this week, and I'm in Chicago today. And if you go to #AmbassadorTeddy, and I hope all your listeners do, you'll be able to see photos from today's great events and every day's great events that I have the honor to serve as the U.S. ambassador to Poland.
But you're not the most famous owner of a German Shepherd, of your boss.
Of course.
Biden has his own German Shepherds. Do you talk about that at all? Have you ever mentioned how to behave? His dog is not behaving as your dog is.
So that is so funny that you asked that, because as you know, President Biden came to Warsaw in February after he made his brave, historic visit to Kiev, Ukraine, his risky visit to Kiev, Ukraine. He came to Warsaw and shared his story with the world. But I had a chance to brief President Biden before his speech, to meet with him alongside the American community. And one of the things that he and I talked about was about our German Shepherds and about how wonderful German Shepherds are, how loyalność, my late father, Zbigniewa Brzeziński's favorite word, loyalność, how loyal German Shepherds are. And so we compared notes on German Shepherds. And I loved that President Biden, like you, knew about Teddy. Teddy has on Instagram about 13,800 followers. And I'm hoping by sharing this story on your radio show, I can get a little bit more.
Now he's going to be so much more popular since we...
You promise?
I promise, because I do believe that we have much more followers than your dog. So we'll boost it. We know how this social media
#AmbassadorTeddy. So I'm counting on you to see the numbers today. Boosted. Okay.
But I'm so glad that you mentioned your father. Obviously, speaking with you without talking about your family is almost impossible. Everybody know you, Brzezinski, ambassador. Most everybody knew your father, late Zbigniew Brzeziński, but very few knew your grandfather, also ambassador, Tadeusz Brzeziński. And 2 days ago, he was honored a special prize. Please share some information about your late grandfather, because the story is just extraordinary and special, and especially special for Polish Americans and for Polish Jews.
So I'm so glad you asked about my grandfather, Tadeusz Brzezinski, because I think about him every single day as I am U.S. ambassador to Poland. And here's why. Because he had been an aspiring diplomat, not in the American State Department, but in the Polish Foreign Ministry before World War II. And he had been a really good diplomat. As a young professional, he had become consul general to Lyon, France, to Leipzig and Dresden, Germany, and then in 1938 was sent as consul general to Montreal. And his career was interrupted by, of course, the Nazi German invasion of Poland in 1939, and then the Soviet occupation of Poland after World War II. And my grandfather, Tadeusz Brzezinski, sold insurance door to door for the rest of his life in Canada and wasn't very professionally successful. He would have loved to have been an ambassador. He would have loved to have been an ambassador from Poland to the United States. And there's not a moment that I'm in Warsaw as ambassador that I don't walk in his shadow and his footsteps and I don't take a second for granted, thanks to him. But the story you refer to is that when he was consul general in Leipzig and Dresden, Germany, in the early 1930s, that was before the most vicious phases of the Holocaust. But already the Nazi Party and Nazism was on the ascent in Germany. And various groups had their passports taken from them and not given back by Nazi authorities, including Poles and Jews living in the Dresden, Leipzig area. And some of them came to him and asked him to give them Polish passports. And he did it without question. And those that came and asked him for Polish passports and that he gave those Polish passports to were able to flee and lived. And there are some wonderful testimonials in the Living History Project of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. that you can even pull up online. Friedel Katz, for example, is someone who gave such a testimonial, and her husband. He was the real hero, frankly speaking, of the Brzezinski family, because he defied official protocols and official rules to rise to a higher moral calling. And he is a hero in our family. So few people know about him, and he informs every moment that I'm in Poland, and he was recently recognized for his contributions in Warsaw, as you state.
Before we come to the really serious questions, last question about your family, but with a family legacy like yours, it's really hard not to believe that you were kind of deemed to have to pursue a political career. Did you have this pressure with your father? Did you talk about it? Do you still remember growing up, say, "Oh, Marek, let's do this"? Kiedy tato może mówił po polsku do małego Marka, żeby został kiedyś politykiem.
Well, thank you for that question. My father didn't try to pressure or guide me, my sister Mika Brzezinski, or my brother Ian Brzezinski in any way professionally, but instead tried to give us learning experiences and professional opportunities as we grew up, and probably before we even fully appreciated them. My father was very much a disciplinarian, I will say that. He felt that a lot had been given to his children, and therefore we are not to take it for granted. But well before we could fully appreciate what he was sharing with us, he included my sister Mika, my brother Ian, and I in his professional endeavors. So when I was very young, we had the chance to have dinner with Pope John Paul II. When I was very young, we were able to go to China and retrace parts of Mao Zedong's Long March in Western China. And he included us in things like that before we were even fully knowledgeable about what we were participating in, because he knew we would grow into them. But he never guided us towards one field or another. Instead, I think all of us found our own way based on a growing realization regarding what capacities we have and what capacities we don't have. I think when you're a young person, it's easy to deceive oneself that one has capacities that one actually doesn't have, and sometimes one overlooks the capacities that one does have. And early on, I realized that at bottom, what I love to do, if you boil it down, if you ask me what I really love to do, is even though I'm a shy person, I like to meet people, and I like to try to solve problems. So that's the definition of a diplomat. A diplomat meets people and tries to solve their problems. And in the private sector, that's what an attorney does. And that's what I became in the private sector. And I believe, I can't speak for them, but I believe my sister and my brother each found their own calling through a genuine clarification in their own mind regarding what capacities they had. And that's what my father wanted us to do, to fully exploit whatever competences we brought to the table, while at the same time not taking for granted any benefits that we had. He was a very generous father who also gave us tremendous advice, I have to say. Whenever I've had setbacks and disappointments in my life, he did this with my brother and sister too. My father always shared with us something that he had learned from that was one of the greatest disappointments that he had had in his life that actually turned into something that was a good thing for him. And he shared this story whenever I had setbacks and disappointments. And the story was that as a young Polish American, he had gone to graduate school at Harvard University, finished his PhD, was on tenure track as an associate professor, highly popular at Harvard University, and then was denied tenure, shocking him and my mother. They expected to be an academic couple in Boston for the rest of their lives. My mother was teaching art at Boston University, and they knew they had to find jobs elsewhere, that the jobs in Boston had ended. So my father said to himself, I want this to be a disappointment and not a defeat. A defeat is something that brings you down and keeps you down. A disappointment is a setback, but that you grow from and you learn from and you are strengthened from. And he said to himself he should have branched out further than being a professor at Harvard to kind of cover his bases and to pursue other professional opportunities that could come to him. And so he went to New York City, and he became a professor at Columbia University. But more importantly, he diversified his professional activities and reached out to Wall Street. And with David Rockefeller, set up something called the Trilateral Commission, through which he met then Governor Jimmy Carter of Georgia. And after Watergate, my father, a Polish American, urged then Governor Carter to run for the presidency. And in 1977, the worst nightmare of the Soviet Union, a Polish-born emigre became national security advisor to the President of the United States at the height of the Cold War. And you know something funny is that after the Carter administration, Harvard came back to my father and offered him tenure, and he said, I've moved on, and didn't take it. And I always felt that my father was a very generous father because of those lessons. Those are worth more than any kind of material thing he could have given us.
Thank you for sharing this beautiful, inspiring story. But going forward, about a year ago, in this studio, a radiothon took place organized by the Polish-American Congress and this radio and our newspaper. About $250,000 was raised for a medical aid for Ukraine. Poles in Poland and abroad, especially diaspora in US, are helping Ukraine to defend itself against Russian aggression. Why is it important to keep alive the spirit and energy of helping Ukraine?
Well, I have to emphasize to Polonia, this is your moment. This is your moment. Thanks to Polonia, Polska jest bezpieczna, Poland is safe, I Polska jest zabezpieczona, Poland is secure. You brought Poland into NATO. You brought Poland into the visa waiver program. You helped bring Poland into the European Union. Poland is safe and secure, but its neighbor, Ukraine, has been attacked. And in one of the humanitarian events of the century, the Polish people have shown, like the Natalie Hawkins song goes, that love is the answer. They have embraced Ukrainian refugees in the millions. Ukrainian refugees in Poland are each in someone's house or apartment as a product of national policy. That is greatness personified, for which President Biden in February said, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, on behalf of the American people. The fight, though, is not over, and Ukraine remains under grave, grave threat, and the end of this war is not in sight. So whether it's the Polish Red Cross or Polish Humanitarian Action or some other NGO helping Ukrainian refugees in Poland or Ukraine, there are so many different ways to give this help. And every dollar counts. And I urge the Polonia to step up and to renew this, because by rising to a higher moral calling, I talked about my grandfather rising to a higher moral calling. All the Polish people are rising to a higher moral calling by the way they are supporting the people of Ukraine. This will behoove the people of Poland in seen and unseen ways, and hopefully will bring a renaissance to Central Europe that all the Central Europeans deserve, with a Western-oriented, Western-integrated Ukraine.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Ambassador. Like you mentioned, there is no end to be seen in the war in Ukraine, and it seems like this war is escalating. Are F-16s the answer to ending this war?
Russia clearly has changed its tactics over the last year, and the American support for the Ukrainian people to defend themselves against this horrific attack have likewise changed. When the Ukraine war first broke out on February 24th, 2022, the Americans supplied javelins to the Ukrainian people to defend themselves. When the Russians began to pulverize Ukrainian cities, we then supplied HIMARS. Now it's tanks. So we are watching as Russian tactics change and responding accordingly. Importantly, the Ukrainian people are winning. I mean, that's the incredible thing. Who would have thought this time last year that full scale the Russian military would be being pushed back by the Ukrainian people? And that's exactly what's happened. The Ukrainian people will win this war because they have a morale and an inspired calling to protect themselves and their homeland and their people. And if Putin's answer is that he has more people to put into the meat grinder of the Ukraine war, and that's his reason to keep going, well, I don't think that his reasons are that good. And I think everyone sees that.
Thank you. In March, U.S. Army established first U.S. garrison in Poland, and Polish-born Colonel, Illinois National Guard, Andrew Adamczyk of Springfield, we had him with us today.
Sure.
And he is also Polish May 3rd Constitution Parade Grand Marshal.
Aha.
Colonel Andrew Adamczyk will become the garrison commander. And Polish Army and is also celebrating 30th. Polish Army and Illinois National Guard are also celebrating together 30th anniversary of close cooperation. So these are a close relationship and cooperation between U.S. and Polish Army. Does this historical cooperation mean that Poland and Poles can feel safer thanks to the permanent presence of U.S. troops?
Well, I think it's important to put what you said in a historic context, because for the last more than 200 years, there is a history of Americans fighting for Polish freedom and Poles fighting for American freedom. Tadeusz Kościuszko, Kazimierz Pulaski, Poles who fought for American freedom. And likewise, Americans in World War II, in the lead up to 1989, have fought for Polish freedom. And we live in this remarkable moment when America and Poland share the same freedom. And the fact that President Biden announced the first ever permanent U.S. military facility anywhere in NATO's eastern flank, in Poland, in Poznan, with the U.S. Army 5th Corps headquarters, which I have visited several times, and which is absolutely a remarkable command and control, developing interoperability with the Polish military, arranging exercises and training. It could not be more appropriate for the moment. But I also think it's important to know that there are around 10,000 American soldiers deployed in Poland right now. When I was a Fulbright scholar in Poland 30 years ago, between 1991 and 1993, you could still hear the Soviet troops based in Poland singing on their morning jogs, jogging around Kraków. Today, there's 10,000 American soldiers spread out all across Poland, and especially in eastern Poland, in Rzeszów with the 10 Mountain Division. The closeness between America and Poland's military is working. Poland is safe and secure, and I can report to your listeners that the American soldiers, the many, many, many American soldiers deployed in Poland, love being in Poland. They have experienced Polish gościnność, hospitality, and the Poles have been remarkably welcoming, and I'm just so proud that the American military is there.
Okay. One more question from me. There is a notion that U.S.-Poland relations are better than ever. Presidents of both countries, Andrzej Duda and Joe Biden, said this many times. About a week ago, Celeste Welander, Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs, said that Poland has become a leader among NATO allies in supporting Ukraine. She made this claim at the hearing of the House of the Representatives Committee on Armed Services. Mr. Ambassador, could you comment on the status quo of Poland-US relationship, or maybe it's not the status quo, but the relationship between two countries that is still developing, and what way it is developing, and how do you perceive it?
Well, I will simply quote the title of one of the lead editorials in today's Wall Street Journal, one of our top national newspapers here in America. One of the lead editorials in today's Wall Street Journal is entitled "Poland, the Indispensable NATO Ally." Poland is seen as having totally gotten it in terms of what it means to be a military and security ally, especially now in this time of crisis. It has meshed together like none other, but there's more work to be done. There's work to be done for Ukrainian refugees. There's work to be done on higher education in Poland and providing resources for Polish young people to get the best education that they can and that they deserve. So there's much to be done for a absolute organizing agenda for the Polish-American community. But as I said, this is your moment. This is the time to step up.
Polish-American relationships are stronger than ever. You mentioned this on many occasions. President Biden visited Poland twice already. Is Mr. President Duda will be visiting White House anytime soon?
Well, I think the fact that President Biden has visited Poland twice in the last year says everything you need to know about this administration's embrace of what Poland is doing, and the thank you that the President Biden wants to extend to the Polish people and the government of Poland. The fact is that we're seeing Poland as a humanitarian superpower and stepping up for people who need help today. And that is seen in our visits to Warsaw, in the president's visits to Warsaw. And it's not just him. Vice President Harris has visited Warsaw. Over 150 members of Congress, so representatives and U.S. senators, over 150 have visited U.S. Mission Poland since February 2022. So there is a constant recognition of the importance of Poland's role, exchanges of ideas, and joint planning, and thinking through about what it is that we will do next.
You live on your suitcases. You travel a lot. Even today, you've been in a couple of places. You had a breakfast in D.C.
I did.
You have several meetings here in Chicago, but you'll be back in D.C. This evening. But you travel
back in Warsaw.
Yes, back in Warsaw.
Yeah, back in Warsaw.
Back in Warsaw.
Yeah.
You compared living in Sweden to living in Poland now over a year. And I remember my interview a couple of months ago when Patrick Słowinski, General Counsel of Krakow, ended his post in Krakow, going back to his he's Wisconsin native, but I think he went
Sure.
back to Virginia.
Yeah.
And I shared with him a lot of stuff about living in Poland, and he was amazed by the hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
He was amazed by things that he discovered as a Polish American, but you as well, a Polish American, and though you were there in the early 90s, but now Poland is so much different. How is Poland
Yeah.
treating you?
My gosh, let me just say this. In so many ways, I see how Poland has blossomed in 30 years. But one way in particular that I want to share with your listeners, when I was a Fulbrighter in Poland 30 years ago, Poland had just come out of the shroud from behind the Iron Curtain, and it was just connecting with the West. And now 30 years later, Poland is about as globally oriented. Poland has local roots, but global reach. And I see that with people all around Poland. And to me, it is amazing to see the progress the Polish people have made in terms of their knowledge of the world, their understanding of what it takes to connect with the world. Often I will go to a small town in eastern Poland or along the coast, and I'll meet a young person who speaks perfect English, and they've never even been out of the country of Poland. They've never been to the UK or the United States, and they learned perfect English from their iPhone. That to me is amazing, and I see that in so many different ways. The innovative potential of the country is stunning, and I hope that all your listeners go see Poland today.
Hopefully we all will. Thank you for the invitation. You always welcome here in our
Thank you.
studio and at the P&A building, who was visited by a couple of presidents, as you probably know from our President Frank Spula. President Reagan was here. President George Herbert Bush was here. President Trump was here. So if your boss wants to stop by, he's welcome.
I will pass that on.
Anytime that, he will not be the first president to visit the P&A building, the place where 103.1 FM Polish American Mix, and obviously the Polish Daily, the oldest newspaper, Polish language outside Poland, is located.
Well, as you know,
over 100 years.
As you know, President Joe Biden has said that when he was young, he wishes his name had been Bidensky because he grew up with Polish Americans in eastern Pennsylvania and really, really loves Polonia and the diaspora. So I'll pass on your gracious invitation.
Thank you very much. We couldn't be more proud that Polish American is an ambassador of
Thank you so much.
in
It's
Poland.
my highest honor.
And thank you for visiting our studio.
Thank you for having me.